Welcome to Life by Design, episode 378. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richardson. Once again, not joined by my colleague, Dr. Crescio Jug, and we're talking about how to burn fat. More specifically, just what are the best, people ask me all the time, what are the best ways to lose weight? Fastest, quickest, how can we get to this? Now, I think when we talk about this, obviously the context is this needs to be done in a way that's healthy. It needs to be done in a way that is sustainable. So there are some really intense things that you can do very quickly to lose fat, very aggressively. That's not what today's episode is about. Today's episode is, what lifestyle changes are very much body fat reduction focused. What's a normal, or I should say, what's a healthy amount of body fat that, we could feel comfortable losing, over the course of a period of time? I think half a pound to a pound and a half a week, maybe even 2 pounds a week on the more aggressive side of things. So if you think about that, I know a lot of people will come and they'll consult with our office or they'll consult with the Fit Club and they'll say, oh, look, I'd love to lose 60 pounds this year. And that's not to say that 60 pounds isn't possible in 12 months. It's aggressive, but it's definitely doable. And people have done it before. So, when somebody's looking at losing 10 pounds or 5 pounds, I think they look at this as a very big, daunting task. It's really not. It's very, very much possible. And there's a handful of things that if you change them and work towards changing them, then you're going to see those results. So I think the end game here, though, is that you're getting healthier. And the healthier you get, the easier it is to lose body fat. The body, when it's managing stress better, when it is functioning better on all cylinders, not just food. This is not just a dietary thing, not just an eat less, move more type concept, although that's a pretty good start for most people. But there's ways that we can hone that in and make it even more specifically focused on how we're going to reduce body fat in a healthy way. So let's talk about that. We talk about our Eat by Design model. We talk about our Move by Design model, the Power by Design, and the Think by Design. So I think the fundamental place to start here is Think by Design, and that your mindset is really one of the most important things that you have to have in place. And, we often think about fat loss or weight loss as a diet change. And the dietary change is important, but I would say it's probably the second or third thing that needs to be focused on. The first thing that needs to be focused on is your mindset. If you're looking at this as something that is going to be a quick fix, something that is going to be an overnight success, then you're destined to fail. If you're already looking at the reasons why you're not going to be successful, I can't do this, my schedule, it's too expensive, whatever those reasons are, that's exactly why you're not going to succeed. So, starting to figure out your value system first is always a great place to start, right? What are my values? What do I care about? What am I trying to accomplish in my life? And let's say, for example, your values include your children. This is a great example for parents. You want to be around for them. You want to be around to experience their life. You want to be able to be a part of their life. And health is that thing that without it, you just can't. And I'm not just talking about death, but I'm talking about, feeling bad. I'm talking about not having energy. I'm talking about being irritated, not being happy, your moods being disrupted. So our health is a fundamental component, us having a great life. And if our value system includes enjoying life with other people and enjoying life ourselves, then we need to make sure that health is at the forefront of the things that we're doing and the things that we're pursuing. So once we get that set, we've got our mindset in place, we've started, and again, that's a much longer conversation, but you get the idea. Once that's in place, we can start to move forward into the next layer. And we look at the next layer, and then we're looking at things like fitness, right? We're looking at things like movement. I would say that, as much as as much as diet is going to make a significant change, I would start with the movement side of things. I would start with starting to do some strength training. Now, for some of you, even before strength training comes in, you might have to work on mobility. You might have to fix, your problems in terms of how your body works and moves. So a lot of times when we consult with a case, they ask me, what's the most important thing? And well, the most important thing is wherever your greatest deficiency is. So if your greatest deficiency in the blueprint is in your your mindset, then we need to start there. If your greatest deficiency is in structure and the nervous system, then we need to correct those problems first. You think about strength training as an example. Yes, is that a pillar? Absolutely. But what if your movement patterns are impaired? What if you have really horrible structural problems or postural deformities? What if your neurological system's compromised and then you try to start strength training? You're going to find that difficult. You're not going to achieve the optimal result. And so in that sense, we would start with analyzing the spine and nervous system. We would start with making the corrections. We would start with monitoring that in order to get you to a place where things are functioning more optimally. Then we might start with mobility, depending on, again, where your deficiency is, moving then into strength training. For many people, the mobility portion and even doing the mobility workouts are strength training. Right? If we're doing a movement that we can only repeat, let's say 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times before we are fatigued or we're unable to actually, make that movement, that's essentially strength training. You don't have to have a 400-pound bar on your back or be bench pressing, 300 pounds in order to be considered strength training. Strength training is simply resistance training where there's enough resistance that you fail after a certain period, and that maximizes the strength training effects. And so strength training is great because it builds or at least stimulates the development of muscle. The more muscle we have, and I just did an article about this, about building muscle to lose fat. So the more muscle we have, the more mitochondria we have, that means the more energy usage we're going to have. And so the more lean muscle you have, and even if you can't see it and you say, I've got a lot of body fat, building lean muscle, and building muscle for that matter, is going to increase your body's metabolism because it requires more energy for your body to maintain that muscle. So you're giving your body the signaling that, hey, I need a lot more, I need to utilize a lot of energy to sustain the amount of muscle that I have. And again, the only way you'll sustain that is to continue to give your body the stimulus that you need that. Now, when we get through and we start doing some strength training, that's great. And then what can we do next? Well, we might add in some conditioning. So different types of conditioning, whether it be aerobic conditioning is a great place to start. Aerobic is nice because it's very easily recoverable. And I think that's important, especially if you're newer, if you're deconditioned, if your health level is impaired. And aerobic type conditioning can be a great place. You might have heard of more of a higher intensity type conditioning, and those are great. Higher intensity type conditioning or HIIT type workouts where it might pair a more, quick burst activity with short recovery periods and it keeps your heart rate elevated. It can be great at ramping up fat burning and promoting weight loss over an aerobic base. But again, it's not to say that the aerobic activity doesn't have a place. I think, again, the context here is it depends on where you're at in that. And so, we've talked about our think by design, and we've talked about our move by design. So we need to correct the structure, which would be power by design. We need to improve neurology, which is power by design. Then we need to go ahead and improve and enhance our move by design, which is our mobility, and then our strength training, and then our conditioning. Now we can talk about diet. All right, so let's talk about diet. So when it comes to diet, some of the really easy changes that you guys can make, simply put, eat more protein. I know I've been kind of beating this like a dead horse lately because it is, I just think, the starting point for most people. The first two principles in Eat by Design are real food first, protein with every meal. Real food first, protein with every meal. And so focusing on a high protein diet helps preserve muscle mass. Again, it keeps metabolism up during weight loss. So if you're on a hypocaloric diet, meaning you're eating less food than your body needs, making sure that you've got your protein dialed in is maybe the most important component. So a lot of people will start to eat less food, but it also means they'll eat less protein. And when they eat less protein, they're less full. They have a tendency to then binge. And so they'll eat a lot of food, and then they'll go and they'll eat nothing. A day, 2 days, very little. Then they get hungry and then they'll eat a bunch of food and they'll eat way more calories than they need. And so a high protein diet is more satiating for you, and it also preserves muscle mass. So when you don't have a lot of calories going in, we don't want our body breaking down protein, meaning muscles. We want it to sustain the muscle mass while it's reducing body fat. All right, so that's a very, very important one. Adding healthy fats. So we go back, we got our protein in first, and then we'll go ahead and we'll place our fats in. What kind of fats? Well, we want to eat things like olive oil and coconut oil and avocados, and maybe a few nuts and seeds. We want to stay away from the seed oils and the canola oils and, really fats that come inside processed type foods. These are great. All right, fat doesn't make you fat. Yes, fats are calorically dense, so 9 calories per gram versus 4 for carbohydrate and protein. And protein, back to the protein rationale, is protein takes a lot of energy to digest. So at the end of the day, when you digest your protein, it's probably closer to 2.5 or 3 calories per gram, just because it requires more energy to digest protein, which is also why protein and keeping it higher is a great thing to do, whether you're on a fat loss path, or whether you're trying to build muscle or just maintain. Keeping our protein at a very high level, a gram per pound of body weight is, a reasonable target for most people looking to seek out these goals. So eating more healthy fats. And then people always want to know, what about carbohydrates? Number one, regardless of where we fall on how many grams of carbohydrates, you want to cut out all of the refined carbohydrates. So absolutely get rid of anything that is refined first. That means all of our processed foods. That means, all of the pastas and the white breads and cereals and granola. Get rid of all that stuff. And then we can talk about, if we are going to consume carbohydrates, or what level of carbohydrates in our carbohydrate appropriate diet, then we're going to talk about what safe starches are a great source for you and how much of those are you going to have. Okay, so what are some of the other extra things we can do? Sleep. Sleep is almost like the missing link here. It's one of those things that, for me, I don't get enough sleep, and it makes, some of these physical changes more difficult. And, if you look at just going to bed earlier, getting even a couple more hours of sleep throughout the course of the week, those add up. And studies show this over and over again, that you have a much more likelihood of successful weight loss when you're getting adequate sleep. And you may not think that sleep plays a role, because when it comes to weight loss, we often think about diet. We're thinking about, what we're eating, maybe a little bit of exercise, but it's really diet. But research shows that, a lack of sleep, it changes our hunger hormones. It makes us more susceptible to being hungry. And because of that, we're going to eat more. And, when we look at part of this is really blunting your appetite. And that brings us to the last couple here, a couple ways that you can blunt your appetite. So if you're looking at losing body fat, you're simply going to have to eat less than your body requires. And, you'll hear people in different areas, and let's say with keto or lower carb, saying, well, it's different. It's not quite that formula, but you can't beat the, energy in, energy out. It's just more complicated than people assume that it is. There's other factors in the energy in and energy out. But if you take in more energy than your body uses, then you're going to gain fat. If you take in less energy, then you're going to lose fat. And so let's keep it super simple. So part of the way that you eat, or how many carbohydrates or the protein, part of it is, yes, the nutrient that your body's getting in order to build the body, but it's also about, helping keep hunger down. And so that's an area, I think, with fat loss that people don't give enough consideration to. How do we keep our hunger down so we're not eating more, which really is, a big part of the process. Apple cider vinegar is something that could actually increase fat burning, at least according to some research. But I like it simply because it enhances the feelings of feeling full, and it reduces your appetite. And so I'll take apple cider vinegar. You can drink it with water. You can drink it as it is. So again, don't get too freaked out by that. It's not as bad as you think it is. Also, by the way, apple cider vinegar, great for gargling with the throat. I know that's kind of an off-topic one, but something that all of us do in our house on a regular basis. You feel a little bit of itch in the throat, some inflammation. You'd be amazed at how gargling with apple cider vinegar actually, it's almost shocking sometimes. We want to focus from a liquid standpoint. I know people talk about what to drink. Obviously, going back to the processed foods, we're not talking about diet soda or soda in general. Coffee, tea, water, those are essentially the liquids that we would recommend. And that leads me to coffee. Why coffee? Why caffeine? Caffeine is essentially the primary ingredient in every fat-burning supplement. So I'm not suggesting you take fat-burning supplements, but, caffeine is a central nervous system stimulant, so it increases metabolism and it increases the breakdown of fat. It also is an appetite suppressant, so it can help us reach the goal that we're trying to reach here. And so, the other ones that I would think about is making sure I'm getting adequate probiotics. So making sure that my gut is taken care of, especially if we're reducing the amount of food we're eating. We may have a reduced, bacterial flora. Again, it depends how restricted your diet gets, but probiotics, so omega-3 fats, if you're either getting them through your animal products or you're adding them in with, say, a fish oil supplement. Vitamin D, so 5,000 units a day is a starting point for most adults with vitamin D. I gave you a lot today, guys, but I think it's a great starting point just to kind of put the blueprint together in your mind and think about it broken down into pieces. Think by design. We got to get our mindset right. Once our mindset's right and we're on path for this long-term approach, a half a pound to a pound and a half, maybe 2 pounds a week. And remember, that's not linear. So that's not, oh man, it's not working. I didn't drop a pound. You could drop 10 pounds in 1 week and then nothing for 3-4 weeks and then drop 5 pounds. It doesn't work in a linear sense. So you can't look at it like that. You've got to be more process oriented. Did I, meet my goals today? Did I do my exercise 4 days? Follow more of a process oriented procedure and use that as your tracking. So think by design, get our mindset right. And then we're going to talk about movement. For some of you, the first step in movement is analyzing the spine and nervous system. Make sure there's no structural problems. Make sure that when we do go to move, that we're in a more optimal state. So in a sense, that incorporates the power by design component of the blueprint. And then we get into our movement. So we're going to look at mobility work first, make sure we can move. Then we'll start to add resistance and strength training. Then into some aerobic conditioning, simply because, not saying it's better than high intensity interval training for fat loss, but it is a great entry point for people. So that's, again, the context dependent on, what your health level is like and how your body's function is. So either aerobic or a higher intensity training. And you're probably going to have a mix of all of those depending on the program you're in. I know in our programs, there's a little bit of everything, and depending on what your goals, will direct you based on those goals. And then we get into the diet. So real food. There's a strategy where you could have, we've taken this strategy and used it. Myself, my brother, Dr. Joel, we've used this before, more aggressive protein shakes only, one meal a day. So it can be done, but I'm advising you to focus on eating real foods. Secondarily, to focus on protein with every meal. And then after that, we're going to focus on getting more good fats, and then we'll hone in the carbohydrate intake based on some of your goals, but we are going to get rid of all those processed foods. And then all those other ones we talked about, the vinegar, the sleep, the caffeine, that's more than enough information for you guys to get going and a template for you to start following. So if you have questions about that, wherever you see this podcast posted, post them below and I'll get wind of that and I'll answer them for you. Or you can just send them to me, jamie@lifebydesign.com, and I'll answer them that way. Guys, thank you as always for joining the drive to 1 million families worldwide living life by design.